Alright, so we are going to look at the upper zone 3 now. This is, you can be looking down at the homestead zone, which we've seen in the first two parts of the series. And we're looking down on our processing area where we have our our garages and barns and sheds and accommodation and classrooms. And then up the valley we have the next series of Riverine terraces, which makes the next zone 3. So zone 3, like any zone, can be broken up into subunits, zone 3A, B, C, and so on. And because this zone 3 is a little bit further out from the homestead zone, it's a little less intensive. It's a bit more of a stretch to get there, and it's more difficult to keep an eye on it. And so everything up here is a little hardier. However, it's still an intensely productive zone. And the river flows past. It's incised quite deeply below the field level. Fortunately, it's not going to go any deeper than this because we have bedrock here, and this is going to be a place where we put our next sand dam. Again, you know, a series of sand dams down a river, they just rehydrate the groundwater table and raise it and push water in under the field. So if you can sand dam all the way along your streamline, especially if they're these type of desert streamlines or drainage lines, you can hold and infiltrate a lot of water, and over years you build up so much water that there's a permanent supply of water seeping out of the sand dams. So our next series of fields are a similar model. It's swales with trees on contour and alleys of pasture in between. So this is the bottom end of this, what we call the top fields, and we're going to bale now. We'll have a quick look at that baling process. We're going to bale this lucerne, it's ready, and we have a row of almonds on contour, and they are all in fruit. And then sitting on the swale mound, the second swale up from the bottom, we have a row of pomegranate, also fruiting heavily, and a little mulberry on the end. I'm testing mulberry to see how well it does out there, because it's an excellent fodder. And then along the edge of the field, towards the more southerly region, we have olives. So the field is bounded by olive, and they run all the way down the side of the field. And that lucerne in the next field is going to be grazed. And then again we've got a scattering of indigenous trees, acacia. So this would be your classic, this is the Acacia siberiana, your flat crown acacias. And then we also have some xanthofolia, the yellow fever tree. And once we've baled, we're going to start irrigating again. 4 weeks later we will bale once more. And then we've got the road up there above us. And these swales here, they catch water that run off this ridge. So we get runoff coming off the ridge onto the field, and they infiltrate into the swales. And basically in these zone 3 systems we have a minimum width, alley width mostly, of about 25 meters between the swales or contour belts of tree. So it's not absolutely consistent all the way, because your field width is going to vary according to contour. So this is all surveyed out. And then on the swale wall we have leguminous ground cover growing, which we chop and drop. And then we go up into the next field, which is slightly wider, but yeah, the length of the field is not as great as the one below, because the riverine terrace gets narrower as we go along. And so this was baled about nearly a week and a half ago, and so the lucerne is well on its way to recovery. And then the next swale up we have a windbreak, because this zone 3 is quite exposed to the wind. It faces southwest, and so we get the southwester coming in the afternoon onto it. Gets quite windy, and you know, the wind dehydrates the landscape, and it can also, when it gets stronger, damage fruit on trees. So we have planted Buddleia saligna, the false olive, which is a native to this region and grows in the Riverine environment. It's a fast grow, or push about at least a meter a year, and it will form a nice hedgerow, and it will dampen the effect of the wind. And then we are going to be planting another contour belt of trees down the middle of these fields. This is going to be taking a contour belt of naartjie and orange. And then here I'm hoping to get hold of some pistachios to experiment. It's proved quite a challenge to find them, so we haven't planted up here, and we haven't put a hedgerow here either of olives on the end here, because I want to break the continuum of the olive hedgerow with carob, but I've got to get sexed carobs. I can't get arbitrary carobs because the males don't produce, so you want predominantly female carobs so you can get the pods off, and I might mix in the odd mulberry. So here we have another belt of Buddleia saligna on swale, and then this field we've got a row of pecan nuts running down the middle, and they need to be protected when they're young, so they're in these netted boxes, because otherwise the leaves get burnt, especially if they get wet from the irrigation. So we'll have a row of pecans here producing within a few years, and so that divides this terrace up into two fields, and then another windbreak. And this windbreak's a little bit older than the ones down below, so you can see it's a bit more established, and there's a very similar characteristic between what we choose for our pioneer species. Our pioneer species are basically trees and shrubs and herbs and ground covers that provide a support function for the production crops that grow within the system. So in this case it's a windbreak and soil building and a pollinator attractor. And then up here we have a small little almost triangular field. We call it the apex field, and we've made the spacing between the rows a lot narrower and tighter because we're not planning to do any baling and cutting. So this is for grazing purposes only. So it's a 6 meter spacing, which I would say is probably on an agricultural level the minimum. Alright? Because any narrower than that it gets quite difficult to set up mobile electric fences. So the cattle have actually just come out of here, and it's now recovering, we're irrigating, and so we have an olive system here, and as the olives get bigger it'll be more shadier, and we've got a mixture of lucerne, cocksfoot, tall fescue in the understory. So we then go through a gate into another set of terraced fields, which we will look at now, and they are the highest zone 3 systems in our zone 3, and then beyond that we have some zone 4s which we will look at in a separate presentation. Alright, so we're going to have a look at the top field over there. Just before we go, we have a mobile bath, excuse me, and this is for those places where we don't have fixed baths for livestock water. So this thing just pick up and place where we need to. So like for example here, each of these little fields, it's pointless putting 6 baths in each field there. 5 baths in each field, we just have this one that we move along. So a lot of what we do in permaculture and on an agricultural level, and actually on any level, is mobile. You know, mobile enables you to change the way you approach and manage your systems constantly. It's very cheap, you don't have to replicate, and it allows you to essentially insert technologies and elements into places on the kind of once off or on the rare occasion. So places where you have elements engaging all the time, it's better to have permanent systems like permanent drinkers and whatnot, but where things come in every now and then the mobile is the ideal. And especially with electric fencing, you know, it contains the animals very well, and it saves you an absolute fortune in fencing, and it gives you that flexibility and ease of shifting and changing your management approach according to the context of the day, the weather context, because most of what you're doing in farming is relating to the weather and the climate. So most farmers have an exceptionally good idea of how climate works, and they've got an eye on it all the time, because that determines the day's activities, it determines everything. So we have fantastic climate monitoring on this farm, records technologies, and yeah, and we use that to good effect. So this particular field system is very far from the homestead zone, and it's really what we call out of sight, out of mind, and so, you know, it's more of a challenge to manage properly. So there are no real easy accessible food crops up here. It's lucerne, pasture and olives basically. Again, like the long bottom field we started this tour with, you know, if we had, say, nuts or fruits up here, we would just bring in the baboons out of the wild zone of the farm, the zone 5. And so again, the system is defined by swales, access routes, fencing, landforms. This particular field system had been terraced, and so that was quite fortunate, and so we've worked with the terracing system, and where there is no terracing, we've put in swales, like this one here, for example, catches runoff that comes down the road and it overflows on to another swale lower down, which was also catching water coming off this ridge here. And you know, the swale is going to just load the ground water table, and it's going to drive the tree roots deep, and so the trees that are sitting on the swale are going to have their roots in a permanent groundwater supply, and their irrigation requirements are going to drop significantly. So these fields here are almost ready for grazing and baling, and we've just finished grazing this particular one, and we're watering, getting it going again, but these ones are going to be next week's baling and grazing work. And so series of terraces, and then we have zone 5 going up onto the top of the Oudeberg. The farm extends right to the top there. It's beautiful, beautiful country, wild and untamed. And what we do there is we observe and we interact, and we restore. So we go through restoration processes, and so those areas under restoration will fall under zone 4, and there's an area just over here, and we'll take a look at that in another video. But we've got wide open vistas, mountains wherever you look. You can walk out your door and walk in 100 kilometers in any direction, and you'll just stay in nature. And that's the attraction of this environment. It's a harsh environment. It's challenging to operate in. It is brittle, so you're always looking to efficientizing the effectiveness of your mineral and your water cycle, because if you can do that, then productivity is bountiful, because the soils are high in mineral, haven't leached out, washed out, and the climate's actually not bad. You know, you've got summer temperatures will sit like as a classic summer day. Today we'll get up to about 30. We'll pick up an afternoon breeze coming up the valley breeze. It'll cool it down. At night it will drop below 20, so nice and cool. Winter time, it's nighttime temperatures around 4, 5, 6, 7 degrees, not too cold. Occasionally we'll dip below 0, but not often. We don't have a lot of frost here, and that's a blessing, because frost really is a huge challenge. It eliminates a lot of the diversity out of your system, and the summer days are nice, the winter days are nice and sunny generally. Temperatures sitting between, in the teens, between 14, 18 degrees. So a very pleasant climate to live in most of the year round. It's not very humid, and this week we've got a whole lot of storms forecast, so very excited about that. Again, access is very important. There needs to be access either on the edge of the field system And if you're on a slope, always put the road on the center of the ridge, because the water will run off either side. And if you have to go across slope, always put your road along the back end of your swales, and then the road won't erode, and any water coming off the road will go into your swale. So our farm is not quite a classic landscape. It's one of your classic agricultural landscape. It's a desert landscape. It's very incised, rugged, sharp. You don't have this kind of rolling country. So the road runs along above the field, and we get access into each field. Each field's also got a bath with a float valve in for the livestock when we bring them in. So it's very simple. We just set the electric fence up and in we move them. And we're going to bale this field now. It won't take long. It's very small, and because our system is compact, we use small agricultural equipment. We've got, you can't get too small, then you don't have any power, but we've distilled it down. We've got a Massey 165, which is an old school tractor, very simple, easy to work on, and that manages most of the farm processes. We do have a bigger tractor to do like heavy lift work and subsoiling, and then we've got a mini baler here, which makes round bales. To see how it works, it's called a B70. That's the size of the thing, and it's perfect for this environment. I did try a larger baler, and it was an absolute nightmare. One of the local farmers saw me with this baler the one day getting it fixed, and he just said, "That's the devil." "Daidang is the devil." And yeah, it is. This thing's very simple, very few working parts, compact, gets into all the tight spaces in the field. There's not much on it to break. It's quite slow, but it's okay. We're not doing large areas. And so when you're working with these compact permaculture systems, you need to have the tools and equipment that are appropriate. And our basic philosophy with equipment is that everything that we need to run this farm, we must own ourselves. Occasionally you hire equipment in, and those are for jobs that are not common. So if you're doing excavating or cutting terraces or foundations, you can hire in machines, excavators and digger loaders. They're not necessary to have, but the basic tools of the trade have to be here, and they need to be in good working condition so that you don't have issues. And that brings in that permaculture principle of produce no waste. A stitch in time saves none. Look after the equipment, make sure it's always in top condition. So now we've just filled the baler, picked it up, it's got a little feed underneath, and now the baler's just winding the bale with string, and when it's ready it will cut itself off, and then we'll open the baler and the bale will roll out. And now we're good to go again. We go down the line, and the baler just picks the lucerne up as it goes along and rolls it up into a nice round bale. Okay, so we just finished baling, and we got about five bales off here. Each bale averages about 30 kilos. It's nice, compact, easy to handle, and it goes now into the barn for storage for winter. And so the better quality bales we feed to the livestock, and the lesser quality bales that maybe we just didn't time it well, or that it was a bit dry when we baled and we lost some of the leaves, we use those for mulching and compost making.